Hello, my name is Paul. Let's talk about healing, specifically from past events, past experiences, perhaps traumatic, difficult things from your past, ways that you relate to your past. I'm going to stop talking about the past and things like that, trying to reiterate the same thing. I'm going to stop, seriously, sometime, at some point in this conversation, not conversation, but monologue, I will stop talking about what I'm talking about. That was funny. Supposed to be. You be the judge. I already think it is. So let's talk about healing. A couple months ago, I saw a quote, and I was just looking for who said it, and one place attributed it to somebody named David Wolf, but everywhere else seems to say anonymous. So, but there's a couple of different variations on how it's said. But I'm going to say it like this: when you can tell your story without crying, then you know you've healed. And so what that is getting into, I believe, my interpretation of that is that when you have broken the conditioning from the past experience, then you are free and you can move on in your life. And so oftentimes we find ourselves unable to process or accept or let go of the thing that happened. Whether that's something that happened to us, the death of a loved one, or an experience of some kind that was traumatic in the moment, and then we felt trauma. So an event is traumatic, can be traumatic, and then trauma is the injury. Now, trauma, like if you get a blunt force trauma, if you're a CSI fan, you'll know that, or was that a Law and Order? Trauma is in the site of the injury physically can be trauma, but then we also talk about emotional trauma with post-traumatic stress disorder and those kind of experiences. So trauma is the injury, and traumatic would be the event that led to the injury, for example, in this context, I suppose. And so when we are fixated, our focus sticks to that moment that's no longer happening now, but happened in the past, and we recall it through memory, then if we're stuck on that, then we might find it's difficult to move forward in life, or it's difficult to process similar events, but not the same event. And we might have associations with things that were currently, like if I'm in a traumatic car accident and I experience trauma, I might have a problem getting into a car because in that moment I'm instantly conditioned or paired for the car accident with cars, and so I have a fear based on that past experience. Now, if you want to get past that, then we want to break that conditioning, break that pairing. And so this quote I start with, when you can tell your story without crying, then you know you've healed. When you can tell your story without crying, then you know that you've broken that pairing, that conditioning. And I guess it's up to you whether or not you feel like that's something that you need to do or want to do in your life. But if you want to do it, somebody should tell you how. I don't know. I don't know. Now, one way that you can do that, and I'm not replacing medical advice or professional support or help or any of that kind of stuff. I'm talking about things. But one way that traumas are dealt with is through talking about it. And that's where this quote probably comes from. But if you can relate your story in a safe environment, a safe setting, in a safe context, you're teaching your brain that the event isn't happening anymore. Man, I'm all kinds of scattered. Maybe it'd be useful to say that it seems that memories of traumatic events are stored through the amygdala, which, if you've been following me, you recognize, we've heard me say it before, but the amygdala is the center of the brain responsible for fear processing, threat detection, and those kind of things. And I just read a text message. I should never do that because I think it distracts me. It's the amygdala. If we have a traumatic experience and then the memory of that is encoded and it somehow passes through the amygdala instead of just resting where memories rest, hippocampus or other areas of the brain, But if it wiggles its way through, it's connected through lines through the amygdala, then that's going to be tied to that. And the amygdala doesn't seem to have a sense of time. And so when I had a friend in the army who through combat PTSD, years later after he's home, he was at a fireworks show, and he ended up falling on the ground and curling up and having a flashback and a very difficult time. And so the fireworks, the lights, and the sounds were exciting these memories, which activated his amygdala, which then felt like those memories were happening in the moment. And so he was responding in the moment as if he had been in his memory years earlier in Iraq. And that is, that's probably an oversimplification. If you're someone who studies these things more in depth, probably a big oversimplification, but that's, I think, a common man's understanding of what's going on. And so you've got this pairing of a memory through an area of the brain that detects threat without the sense of time. So when the pairing occurs, when something happens to bring that memory to mind, I'm avoiding the word trigger, but I guess trigger is appropriate. So it triggers the memory, the traumatic memory, then you feel as if you're there in the moment. And so if you can talk about this, if you can talk about it in a setting that's safe, that your body isn't detecting threat, and you can tell your story without, and it might excite all of these emotions and fear when you're telling the story, but as you do that, and then your body is constantly sensing for dangers. And so even though your mind is getting excited in the fight or flight mode because of the memory of it, your body is detecting there's no problem. I'm sitting still in a chair, there's someone I'm comfortable with nearby, and I don't have a problem right now. And so you start to break the pairing. Remember, from conditioning, when the conditioned stimulus is presented without the response, or what is it? When the unconditioned stimulus is presented without the conditioned stimulus, then it breaks that pairing. It goes extinct. So when you have the thought of, this is terrible, I'm bombing this one, I don't know. Maybe I'll just reset here. What am I gonna? Okay, so talking about the experience helps to break that conditioning on the memory response. All right, so how that, or why that could be useful, is that often we might find ourselves not willing to talk about it, not wanting to talk about it, because when we talk about it, it brings that freshness, the flashback feeling. And so every time we talk about it, we feel emotional distress, and we don't want to feel emotional distress, so we don't talk about it. But by not talking about it, it allows that connection to continue. I think that might make sense. And so by talking about it, we can start to extinct that process, that connection, that conditioning, but it's going to be difficult to do it. And so that's why you're crying. So when you're telling your story and crying, the idea that you haven't healed yet because you haven't broken that conditioning, because you're telling your story, you're refreshing your mind of all of these things, you're feeling like you're living it over again. I had a conversation similar to this with one of my clients regarding relapse recently, and he found himself repeating the story with people, which was necessary at the time, but it was difficult to do that. And so because it's feeling like, I feel like I'm reliving this experience, and I don't want to do that because it's emotionally distressing to me. But the more you do it, you get to the point where you break that conditioning. You teach your brain that happened before, it's not happening now, there's no danger, there's no threat, let go. And so that's the point where, when you're no longer feeling the emotional distress of then, you can talk about it as an event that happened that you're not emotionally tied to in the moment, then that's an indicator that you have healed. I like that quote. That's why I wanted to talk about it, with no plan of what I was going to say regarding or related to it really, but just get on here and just, what do you call it? Freestyle? Why was that so difficult to think of? I'm freestyling philosophy based on a quote. Yeah, that's what I do. That's a cool thing. I like that. Freestyle philosophy. with Paul Brody. Worthless ramblings of me. I don't know. So yeah. So was any of that useful? I always feel like I need to give something that, some kind of, at least one little phrase that makes you go, oh, that's interesting. I'm going to think about that later. You got to take something away from this. Either that, or I got to start telling better jokes so you can at least be entertained while we do this. Maybe I could eat a cactus. No. Yeah. Okay. So, what can you tell me? I'm trying to think if there's something else related to this that I want to say. I had that quote written down. Let's see. I guess so. All right. Yeah. So some other thing is that if we're afraid of the past recollection, then we can never heal from it. So if we're afraid of the past, if we're living in fear of the past experience, then we can never move forward. We can never feel good about it. And so I don't know if I've talked about this in a video yet, but imagery that I have been saying with people recently is that if you're a ship in the harbor and you want to sail, you got to pull up your anchor. If your anchor represents the past and you're attached to it still, you're not going to sail. You can't move forward, or you're not going to move forward as well if you're dragging this anchor behind you. So you got two options. You can cut the anchor, or you can pull it up. If you pull it up onto the ship and store it properly, if you go through a therapeutic process, not professional necessarily, but something for you that's therapeutic process of dealing with the past trauma, if you can process it, store the anchor properly on the ship, you can carry it with you. It's got to be stored properly though, otherwise it's going to lead to problems. Or if you don't pull it up out of the water, then you're not going to go anywhere. So you can store it properly. That's one way. You can take the thing with you. You can take the experience, take the memory with you, but not be held back by it because you're in control of it. You've got it stored properly. Or you can cut that chain and leave the anchor behind and just move on with your life. And both ways can be good, but perhaps if you let go of your anchor and I don't want to take this symbolism or the analogy any further because I haven't tested it yet. But there's something I could probably take it to another level, but I'm going to leave it right at that. If you're a ship and you want to sail and you got an anchor dropped, you got to pull it up and store it properly, or you got to cut it free and then you can move on. And so if we're dealing with past injury, whether it's emotional traumas or physical traumas or whatever it's going to be, but any kind of injury that we want to heal from, we've got to deal with it. We've got to process it somehow. And so you can do that through talking about it to the point where you desensitize your brain to it, but broken the conditioning, or you can do it by accepting that everything that has happened is perfect and it's complete. It's done. It's over with. It's not happening now. And so if it's not happening now, how can it affect me in the future unless I choose to make it? It's like I'm bringing it up new every day. I'm experiencing that traumatic event new every day because I can't let go of it because I'm somehow fixed to it. And that I feel like could be really unhealthy, or at least holds you back like an anchor. So full of talking about things, no real solutions. That's what you get with me. And I can't remember 5 minutes ago, so I don't know what I've said. Hopefully it was something good and helpful, and if not, come back again and maybe I'll get something in the next one. I don't know. I enjoy doing this. If you don't, then obviously not. You didn't make it this far. So if you got it this far, I guess you're enjoying some element of this, and there's something for everybody. So I might watch something like this. I mean, I do watch my videos sometimes, but so I would watch somebody talking about things that were interesting to me. So hopefully this is interesting to you, and if not, that's okay too, because I probably assigned it to you as homework and counseling. So thanks for watching, and now you get to listen to me all the time, and hopefully that's helpful to you. If it's not, fire me. And if you're just watching YouTube videos, write a comment, you're fired, and I'll thank you for it. So that's it for this one, and so far, I think I'm 30 days into this now, every day a video. Can't say they're all phenomenal or adequate, but I'm planning to keep going. As long as I can keep coming up with something, I will keep making videos every day until I don't. Okay, bye.